What's your reaction to this ruling?
The Supreme Court got it right for what that's worth, if you want to know my legal opinion. I mean, you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. But other than that, you know, a situation like that, free speech is protected. I mean, it is our First Amendment right. That's how important it is to us. In fact, the whole Colin Kaepernick controversy, we supported Colin Kaepernick's protest in this show. And in fact, I've argued and continue to argue that the NFL is actually, in fact, injecting politics into the discussion by asking everyone to stand for the national anthem. After all, if it's not, we know what country we're in. This is domestic. It's not an international competition. And so to ask everyone to stand, is it to show nationalism, which I do not support, or patriotism, which I do support? And in this country, one of the best ways to show patriotism, because why are we better than everyone else? Why do we love America so much? Not simply because we're here, but because we are free. And the freedom to protest, the freedom of speech, is the freedom that we hold most dear. And so I support Colin Kaepernick's exercising of that freedom. It's the reason I stand for the national anthem, because I'm proud to be American, because Colin Kaepernick does not have to. And along those lines, here the Supreme Court is upholding our most important value, I think, and tradition, which is freedom of speech. I agree that, and in fact, when speech is unpopular, it is most important to protect it. And so the Supreme Court is right here, in my opinion. I know it sounds funny. I say the Supreme Court's right or wrong, but everyone has an opinion about this, including me. And I agree with the idea that the franchise in Washington can call themselves, has the right to call themselves anything they want. But just because they can doesn't mean they should. And and shame on the owner of this franchise, on Dan Snyder, for then saying hail to and then using that slur, which is also their name. I mean, I know the claim is that, Native American groups that we've spoken to say that it's okay and it's not a big, but unsolicited, I have gotten responses from Native American people whom I've met who approach me and say, thank you for not using that name. And the offended party here is in the right, not the offending party. So yes, the Supreme Court is right. And yes, Dan Snyder, the owner of this team, is still wrong to do it. He has the right to do it. It doesn't mean he should. You can walk up to anyone you want in this country and say whatever you want to their face, so long as it's not threatening. You have the right to do it. Should you do it? Particularly, should you do it to a marginalized and often humiliated group? No, you shouldn't. Shame on him.
I agree with you that I think the name should be changed.
So do I.
I've always stated that, because my attitude is I hearken back to Charles Mann being interviewed by the late, great George Michaels, God rest his wonderful soul, when he said that if it's offensive to one, then that should be enough. Jack Kent Cooke, the former owner for the Redskins, vehemently disagreed with that and said he wasn't changing the name. Daniel Snyder ultimately took over. He holds the same position. It's a money grab, because we know that trademarking that name obviously has been very, very profitable for the organization, for the franchise itself, which is why Daniel Snyder ultimately wasn't prone or wasn't inclined to change the name. Do I think he should change it? Sure. But I do support the Supreme Court's ruling. I think it was the absolutely right ruling, because your First Amendment, the freedom of speech, it's in the First Amendment. It's a constitutional issue. It matters. And accurately interpreting the Constitution is obviously something that should be deemed incredibly important to us all in this nation that we live in. Having said all of that, it's also important to highlight some of the stuff that comes with it. Dan Gilbert has the right to keep his franchise name the way he wants. Daniel Snyder has that right. But that doesn't make him right. Max is absolutely right about that. But we also need to take into account why we should really, really be applauding this ruling by the Supreme Court. Because what the Supreme Court is saying is that we have our Constitution. We have to make sure the laws of this nation are governed by that, under the guise of that, under that premise. And then it's up to you as American citizens to activate yourself to a degree that makes it incredibly uncomfortable for people to be boldly wrong in the face of what is righteous. And that's what has to transpire in our nation. whether it's a Colin Kaepernick, you know, to back into the days of Muhammad Ali and the days before that, the civil rights legislation, civil rights movement rather, and what have you. People's willingness to activate themselves pertaining to issues that influence our society, that's what truly makes America great. Yep. Because those are the kind of things that provoke change. It's not for us to ignore laws, it's for us to highlight those laws and to sit up there and say, this is wrong. And we need to do something about it. And that's why it's so important. That's what we
You and I are
this.
both very patriotic in that way and very proud of America in that way. And not to make this about the Kaepernick issue, but that's why when the national anthem is played and it is very unpopular to not stand, that's why it's so important for people to rally behind the idea with whether or not you agree with a specific point that's made in the protest. The fact is, if you actually believe in American exceptionalism, not everybody does. I do. If you actually believe this is the greatest country in the world, not everybody does. I do. I know you do.
Yes, I do.
I know you do, Molly. It's because we are free. It's because we believe in protecting that right, even when it is most unpopular. It is why the ACLU defended the Nazis' march when, you know, now I'm forgetting the town. But the point is there are many, many instances of extremely unpopular speech being protected in this country. This is an example here. In the case of the Washington franchise, I totally support that ruling and that idea, and I am totally against them continuing to use the name.